Welcome back. This is Ecology Day 10, and today we're going to continue talking about how do some organisms interact with one another in an ecosystem. But before we get to that, we've got a do now question. So go ahead and pause this video, answer question number 1, and press play when you're ready to review it. All right, number 1. In early spring, many wildflowers begin to grow, produce flowers, and release seeds. The leaves of the wildflowers make food before the leaves of the trees in the area begin to develop. The early growth pattern of the wildflowers would likely result in what? Well, if these species are growing at different times of the year, they're not going to be competing over resources. Specifically, there's going to be decreased competition for sunlight between the trees and the wildflowers. So the answer here was A. All right. Now, yesterday I introduced the word symbiosis, and we said that symbiosis is talking about relationships between different species. And I kind of dangled this picture of a crocodile and a bird in front of you and said that surprisingly, this crocodile isn't going to eat this bird, but I didn't tell you why that's the case. And today, we're going to find out why. So for symbiosis, what I want you guys to write down is that this is a relationship in which two species live very closely together. And there are actually 3 different examples of symbiosis or symbiotic relationships that we're going to talk about today. The first one is called mutualism. Okay, and mutualism is when both species benefit from this relationship. So this crocodile and this bird are actually an example of mutualism because they are both benefiting from this relationship. So what exactly is happening here? Well, you might say that this bird is kind of acting as this crocodile's dentist. Now, this bird isn't super passionate about dental health, but it is passionate about getting food. So what it's actually doing is picking out bits of leftover food that are stuck in the crocodile's teeth because he gets a free meal out of it. And how does the crocodile benefit from this? Well, that crocodile is getting a free teeth cleaning, okay? It is getting all of that food. It's basically the animal is flossing for it, right? It's getting all of those bits of food that are stuck inside the teeth out, which decreases the crocodile's chances of getting a tooth infection or something like that. So both organisms here are benefiting from that relationship. Another example of mutualism is this eel and the shrimp. It's pretty similar to the crocodile and the bird, actually, because this eel is getting a free teeth cleaning from the shrimp. That shrimp is able to pick out leftover food, which cleans the eel's teeth and decreases that likelihood of infection. All right, same thing here. We've got another mutualistic relationship between the zebra and these birds that sit on its back. So what do you think is happening here? Well, these birds are able to pick off any insects that are landing on the zebra. So that zebra is basically getting a free cleaning and the birds are getting a free meal, right? Another example of mutualism is this goby fish right here and this shrimp. Now, I'm not going to tell you what their relationship is yet because we're actually going to watch a video on it at the end of class today. And the last example of mutualism here is going to be this sea anemone with this, I always want to say Nemo, with this clownfish, okay? And what is this benefit here? Well, remember that sea anemones are actually an animal and not a plant. So these sea anemones still have to eat. They got to eat something. So what ends up happening is that these clownfish can actually lure in prey for this anemone to eat. And then the clownfish gets a free home out of it. So both of them are benefiting from that relationship as well. All right, next up, we've got parasitism. So parasitism is when one species benefits from this relationship and the other is harmed. So yesterday we talked about mosquitoes are an example of parasites because when they latch onto animals and start sucking up their blood, mosquitoes are benefiting from that, but the host organism is harmed. If anything, it's just annoying to get those mosquito bites, but worst case scenario, those mosquitoes can actually transmit diseases to the host, okay? So the parasite benefits and the other species is harmed. And the third type of symbiosis, I actually didn't include any pictures of on this slide, but we'll talk about some examples in just a minute. And this is called commensalism. And this is when one species benefits from this relationship and the other species is neither harmed nor benefiting. It's kind of indifferent to the situation. And again, we'll talk about some examples of that in just a second. So to quickly recap, the 3 types of symbiosis are, first, mutualism is where both species benefit. So one example you can write down for that is bees and flowers. We talked about this yesterday. Remember that bees are pollinators. So they're going to actually, both species benefit from this relationship, right? Because bees are going to get nectar and pollen from those flowers as food. And in the process, they're going to carry pollen from one flower to another and help those flowers with sexual reproduction and spread that genetic variation. All right, some other examples of symbiosis are legumes and nitrogen-fixing bacteria, as well as termites and protozoa, and all the examples we just saw on the previous slide. So again, mutualism, both species benefit. Right? Second type of symbiosis is parasitism. So again, this is when the parasite benefits while the host is harmed. And most often that comes in carrying diseases. So again, we just talked about mosquitoes, but there's also some other examples of parasites here, and two really just nasty ones, but also like a cool nasty, are going to be things like heartworms and tapeworms. So if you want to just be absolutely horrified, but also inspired tonight, look up videos of parasite removal surgeries. There's one that I watched when I was probably about your age. And when I first started the video, I was like, cool, this is a bowl of pasta. It was not a bowl of pasta, okay? It was a bowl of tapeworms. So what happens with these organisms, these parasites, is if even one parasite gets inside, like one tapeworm gets inside your intestinal tract, it multiplies really quickly. And those tapeworms are going to latch onto your intestinal tract. And if you have a tapeworm, you might realize that you have been really, really hungry recently. And you're like, God, why am I eating so much food? And I'm getting skinnier. Like, what's happening? And what's happening is that tapeworm is actually just absolutely sucking out your nutrients. So anytime you eat a meal, you're not actually getting any nutrients from it because the tapeworm is stealing all of them. So that tapeworm can get really, really giant, and it's gross. But same thing here with heartworms. If you have a dog, you might have had to give it heartworm medication as a puppy, because dogs are really susceptible to this parasite called a heartworm. Same thing, if even one parasite gets inside, it's going to start multiplying really quickly and just deplete those resources from the host. So as you can see, the parasite is benefiting, but the host is harmed. And another example of parasites is also an example that you might have seen if you have a dog, and this is fleas. So fleas are pretty active in the summertime, and they're going to latch onto that host, like a dog, and start feeding on its blood. So you might notice that your dog is like scratching itself. So I mean, like, I've had to give my dog flea medicine before. It's pretty common, but this is an example of a parasite because that flea is benefiting by sucking those nutrients and the blood from the host, but the host is harmed by that process. Right. And the third type of symbiosis is commensalism. And this is when one organism benefits from the relationship, but the other one is unaffected or unbothered by it. So a few examples of this are dust mites in your eyebrows. Now, you might be thinking, Ms. Collins, I don't have dust mites on my eyebrows. I'm clean, but I promise you do. This is just an example of commensalism because you don't notice that they're there. They're not bothering you at all. You're completely unaffected by this relationship. But those dust mites are benefiting because they are eating up your dead skin cells and getting a meal out of it while you are just unbothered by this process. All right, another example of that is when orchids grow on trees. Those orchids can grow up on trees and have higher access to sunlight and resources, but the trees are unaffected by it, as well as bacteria in your intestine. So you've got bacteria living in your gut right now, helping you digest food. The bacteria are benefiting and you're just hanging out. They don't bother you. And another example of commensalism is going to not very good. So I put up some other examples. You may have noticed this if you've been to an aquarium, and you might have thought to yourself, God, that whale is so dirty. What is that growing on him? Ew, he needs to bathe. But this isn't dirt. This is just another species called a barnacle. And this barnacle is benefiting from riding around on this whale because it's getting a free ride. It's just riding around peacefully on this whale. That sounds kind of nice. But it's also getting free meals from this because any sort of food that the whale misses its mouth, the barnacle can pick up. And the whales aren't affected by this. So this is commensalism because the barnacles are getting a free ride and free food, and the whales are just hanging out. They're not bothered by it. Yeah, all right. So that is an example of commensalism. Now, this chart is on your notes, and it just summarizes exactly what we just talked about. So again, symbiosis, 3 types: mutualism, both species benefit; commensalism, one species benefits, the other is unaffected; and parasitism is when one species benefits and the other is harmed. All right, now, I've also attached another video to this assignment on Google Classroom, and that was when I actually want you to pause my video and go watch that example of symbiosis. So this is a nature documentary that's actually going to show you a few different types of relationships between species. So I want you to pause this video, go watch that one and fill out these answers as you go through, and then come back to my video when you want to review those answers together. All right, so number 1 in that video, how do the egrets benefit from their relationship with the deer? So we saw that the egrets get a free ride on the deer's back as they search for food, and the egret can pick the insects off the deer's back. Now, what type of relationship is this? Well, this is mutualism because both of these species benefit. What type of relationship do the monkeys and the deer have? Well, we saw that the monkeys drop food from the trees that the deer can then pick up and eat. And then when the monkeys venture onto the ground for more food, the deer can warn them if the predators are near. So again, this is mutualism because both of those species are benefiting. There's a giant fly in here. Ew, it's gonna eat me. All right, number 4. Why do the goby and the shrimp live together? So this is the same fish and shrimp we saw on that first slide. Why do they live together? Well, the shrimp is able to dig a hole or a home or a burrow for the goby. The shrimp is actually blind, but the goby has really, really good eyesight. So the shrimp actually knows it's safe if that goby is still outside the burrow. And when the goby goes into the burrow for safety, the shrimp is gonna follow it. Now, what type of relationship is this? Well, again, this is mutualism because both species are benefiting. They're both helping each other out. And number 6, what type of relationship do the octopus and the hermit crab have? Well, the hermit crabs are the octopus's favorite food. So unfortunately, this is not an example of mutualism. Hermit crab is prey and octopus is a predator. Right? So their relationship is predator and prey. Now, how does the hermit crab protect itself? Well, we saw that the crab can actually tickle the sea anemone and unstick it from a rock to use it as a bodyguard. So the anemone will actually sting the octopus to repel it if it comes close. But how do we know that the anemones aren't harmed? Well, we saw in that video that the anemone doesn't close up. It's going to close up if it feels like it's in danger. But when the hermit crab picked it up, it was still waving its tentacles and still just hanging out. Now, are the anemones benefiting at all from this relationship? And explain. Yes, so with this, the anemones get bits of food as the crab chews up its food. So again, this helps it get extra food. All right, now, what types of relationships were not shown in this video? And give an example of each. So in this video, we saw a lot of mutualistic relationships, but we actually didn't see any examples of parasitism or commensalism. So I want you to give an example of each that weren't necessarily shown in this video. Right, and that is all I've got for you guys today. So the only other thing you need to do is complete your exit ticket, submit these notes on Google Classroom, and have a wonderful afternoon. I will see you guys tomorrow.